We'll kind of dive into that a little bit more. And then his last question, he just asked, how does my decision fit the whole picture? So kind of wrapping it all up in one big sum there at the end on how do I fit into God's pattern and be part of the picture. So I looked up a couple definitions. Of course, I like to do that when I'm putting this together. So I looked up the definition of purpose, and it says the reason for which something is done or created or for which something exists. And I think that there's, of course, like any other word, there's plenty of different definitions for each word, but that's the one I thought fit best with our lesson this morning. The reason for which something is done or created, which we were all created by God, or for which something exists. And I think that's our purpose. We were created to do God's will, which is our purpose. And that's what we exist for. Purpose is meaning in action. It's taking what we are supposed to do and putting it in action. And then the other definition I wrote out was for pattern. And a pattern is a form or a model proposed for imitation. I like that word imitation that was used there. Because what are we supposed to be? Imitators of Christ, right? We're all called to imitate Christ in our daily walks and in our lives. And we are created in the image of Christ. So I like the way that says that, to form or model proposed for imitation. And when you put those together, I think it points out kind of what I wanted to go with. If you would flip over to Genesis. We're going to go all the way back to the beginning. Genesis chapter 7. Verse 14. And these couple scriptures here are kind of dealing with some examples of, just some examples of how important following a pattern is and being part of the pattern. And I'm sure you can, if you haven't got there yet, you probably know what this is following, but when you look in Genesis 7, and you look at chapter 7, you look at verse 14. If I can find it, there it is. They and every beast after its kind, all cattle after their kind, every creeping thing that creeps on earth after its kind, and every bird after its kind. Did I write the right verse down? That does not look like the verse I wanted. I think I wrote the wrong one down. I'm in the right area. That's good.
Are you, did you pick that verse up after its time being singular? Is that what you was meaning when you?
Yeah, I was trying to find the verse that talks about how Noah was given a pattern to follow exactly. And it's not even chapter 6:14. This is what happens when you take notes at like 12:30 or 1 o'clock in the morning after the kids are in bed. I just finished taking my final the other night, and I was reading. There were some scriptures that came out on that final test for my Life of Christ class, and I remembered this scripture. And I thought, I got to flip over here and look at it. And evidently, I was half asleep when I wrote it down. But I think we understand.
I think it's chapter 6, verse 14.
Yeah. Exactly. That's where it starts there. I think I meant to put 6. Yep, you're exactly right. Make for yourself an ark out of gopher, and then he goes through the entire pattern of exactly how you should follow. You're right. That's what I meant to write. Good job, Jimmy Wade. Thanks for bailing me out there. But the importance of that, when we see Noah building the ark, how easily could have Noah followed his own pattern? How easily could it have been, it says there, make it out of gopher wood. He tells him the exact type of wood, the exact sizes to cut, the exact tools to use, the exact stuff to bond the wood together, to seal up the boat, like everything. How many windows, how many doors, how many compartments for the animals, how many animals you're going to put on it, how many humans are going to go on. Like he knew everything about the pattern from start to finish. And all that time he was doing it, which was what? Took him 100 years to build this boat? He could have easily at one time or other come up short like we do, and I know I all the time go in the junk drawer looking for a loose washer or something I've lost from somewhere else, And how easy would it have been for Noah to do that and just changed it just a little bit? What do you think the end result would have been? I'm thinking that boat probably would have sunk. I don't think it would have floated the way it was intended to. So to me, that was like our first instance of following a pattern. I know there's more to it. If you look all the way back to Cain and Abel, I mean, you could even go into the garden. The pattern was don't eat that tree, and they did it anyway. Cain and Abel were told to give an offering, and one did it this way, one did it the other way, and look at the result of that. That's how we got where we're at now. It's because we don't follow a pattern. But I think when we look at a big instance that it was life-altering that just kind of stands out like, okay, this is a definite test and of following the pattern. He shows us there. Exodus 26. Let's see if I got that one right. It says in verse 30, and you shall raise up this tabernacle according to its pattern which you were shown on the mountain. So here they are building the tabernacle. And again, another instance where they were given the exact specifications. If you go back into the beginning of 26 and even further back, you can see step by step exactly how they were to build that tabernacle in order to follow the pattern. And again, if it would have been off, then it would have been unacceptable. So we see here how in the early scripture that he designs out these patterns, and they're very lengthy, and they're very, I would say, not tedious, but specific, if you see what I'm saying. Go to the New Testament now. I want to see one other pattern over in the book of Philippians. Philippians chapter 3. Verse 17 says, brethren, join in following my example and note those who so walk as you have us for a pattern. For many walk, of whom I have told you often, and now tell you even weeping, that they are the enemies of the cross of Christ. So here he's talking about the brethren following an example, pressing on towards the goal is what leads up to it, kind of teaching us how if we're going to be followers, we have to follow his pattern that was set for us, which we know was Christ himself as he walked on the earth and gave us an example of what the pattern looks like. I know when I deal with pattern or think of patterns or following a purpose, I like to see it. I'm a very visual learner. I want to see pictures. I want to see how it's done. Not so much with instructions as usually this time of year for parents with little ones. Man, I've never put so many things together over Christmas. And more these instructions are getting worse and worse. Like now half of them are just pictures, and I just look at it and going, what's step one? Like, where do I begin on this? Or they ask you to hit this QR code thing with your phone. I'm like, I don't want my phone. I want a piece of paper that says, follow this. I don't need you to spam me another way. I've already got enough phone calls from people right now. You're linking me to another thing. But how easy would it be, do you think, for us as Christians to follow the pattern and answer these questions maybe that I talked about earlier and we're going to get back to? How easy would it be for us if there was just a picture, an exact picture of what to do, or just a code to scan that says, here's what you need to do to get from point A to point B, and not have any issues? How easy do you think it would be for us? You think it'd be easier, or you think it'd be more difficult if we had it all written out there?
The directions too complicated because they put things in there that shouldn't even be there. Just make it simple and do this, do that, do this.
Exactly. And I like the way you said that. If man was to draw out the instructions, we'd put stuff in there that didn't need to be in there and be too difficult, when we already have the instruction book right here. And it's laid out perfectly. Everything that we need is right there. Yet, what you said, you hit. Yep, and you hit the nail on the head with that. When you take it into our hands to draw the directions, it probably wouldn't match this all the way. And a lot of people could, and a lot of us would get close, but human nature always interjects somewhere when we least expect it. And I think that's the biggest thing I've been looking at with our family especially, and we'll get into that in our, I don't want to steal too much of my sermon notes, but when we get into that, you'll see what I'm talking about, that there's a lot of stuff that we've created into our pattern. We've weaved into what we call our pattern to following God, and it's not working. It's more of a distraction than anything. And it's taken just a little bit of humbling and swallowing of pride in our household to see what's going on, for us to wake up and realize that we're wasting a lot of our time and that life is short. And we only have so much time to get this right. There's not as we've talked before in the past, there's not a redo button. They don't let us start over. You can't erase and start from the beginning of the instructions again. Like when it ends, and that's it. And we realize now, I see as the kids get older and the stuff that they're facing, we just made the decision that, hey, it's time to make a big change to our pattern. We need to get back on line with what this one says and not what fits our busy schedule, as we call it. So I'm excited to look at that a little bit more then. But I want to go back to our questions this morning real quick before we run out of time. Again, I apologize for being late and having to rush through some of this, but let's see. So I had a few scriptures I wrote down for when we talked about question number one. Says, am I seeking God's will or am I seeking my own will? And one of my favorite verses in the whole Bible that I enjoy a lot of the Bible, especially when you get into the book of Psalms. It's one of my favorite books to read. But in the book of Micah, chapter 6 is probably what I go to when somebody asks me what my favorite verse is. Sorry, I moved my bookmark. I need to study more in my Old Testament. These pages are sticking together. If somebody's in Micah chapter 6, if you read verse 8 for me, because I am not getting there quick enough.
He has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you, but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God.
Thank you, Jimmy Wade. Yep, that to me sums it all up right there. Exactly what God's will is for us: to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. And I like how it starts with He has shown you. I mean, that right there to me is the instruction, the pattern. He's shown us our purpose. He's shown us the pattern to follow, and sums it up in those three little lines for us. I think it's like I said, I call it my favorite verse, but it's always stuck with me. Gerald Kidd was the minister at Tuttle when we first started attending out there when I met Amber and we were dating. And he referenced this verse quite often, and he kind of called it his, it was like his battle cry or something. He called it his theme verse. And he would always go to it, and it kind of stuck with me the more I studied it and read it and kind of broke it down on what it's talking about and telling us to do. It just, in my opinion, it kind of summed up what the gospel message was in the Old Testament right there early on. So going to our questions, like I said, the first one, am I seeking God's will or my own? We kind of talked about that a minute ago. Martha brought up with how we can get in our own way. We add to and take away to make things fit our way, rather than following exactly what God's asked us to do. What are some reasons you think we do that, other than, like I said, it's human nature? What are some other reasons why you would think that we would add or rearrange, and I'm not talking about adding to the scriptures, I'm talking about you read the scripture and it's giving you something to do, but you want to do just a little different. Because what are some reasons you think we do that as humans?
Sometimes we almost try too hard and read a lot into
Yep.
things that we think it can't be that simple.
Yep, overanalyzing it, and exactly like you said, we think it's got to be more difficult than that. That sounds too easy. And so yes, that's a great point. I often I think about it as kind of in that context of overanalyzing it. I do it out of convenience, and not convenience as in like it's more convenient because I can shave some time off of it, but it's less painful. It doesn't hurt as much. Like if I read it and I kind of, as I like to say every night, sugarcoat the gospel a little bit, it doesn't hurt near as much, because 90% of the time when I'm stepping on someone's toes, it's my own. And I've noticed that a lot, especially going through school and preparing more lessons and getting the privilege to preach a little bit more here and there. I get done with a lesson, I look at, it's like I've looked in the mirror the entire time I wrote the sermon or the Bible class lesson. And I think it needs to be done more often. I think it would help a lot of people. And I know it definitely did there. And I think that's kind of what woke us up to following this new plan for a new year. And hopefully, Lord willing, we can stick with it all year and beyond, and touch others as we do it. Second question, does it fit? Is what I'm trying to accomplish, does it fit in God's pattern? I think looking at that, a big one is, and I've looked back, some of it was strictly because of financial reasons, but here lately I've made a couple moves professionally based on the fact they did not fit in God's plan. I was working on Sunday mornings, and I was working on Wednesday nights, and I might get off on Sunday night in time, but it wasn't guaranteed. But it was guaranteed I was going to miss church because of work. And that's just something I'd never done growing up, other than, of course, when I was in the military. And if you were overseas, there was times that you can't hit pause in war and go to church real quick. I wish you could, but there was just sometimes that Uncle Sam didn't make time for that. But when there was time, there was. But this was something that I chose to do. And as I told the people